Hello everyone. In this lesson, I will teach you how to simplify a radical expression using factoring method. And to do this, let's remind ourselves about the basics for if I have a number, which is a number is divisible by 5 if its last digit is 0 or 5. For example, if you have the number like 205, and we can see that the last digit here is 5, so I can say based on this rule, yes, it is divisible, so I can divide it by 5. You can use the calculator or the long division, like you can say 2 divided by 5, then there is no 5s in 2, so you need to go to the 20 divided by 5, which is 4. Then you multiply 4 times 5, which is 20. You subtract, and then 20 subtract 20, which is 0. Take the 5 down. So now 5 divided by 5, which is 1. So there's 1 5 in 5. So 1 multiplied by 5, which is 5. Subtract, the answer will be finally 0. So this is exactly what when we say divisible by 5, because I divide 205 by 5, and I end with the result or the outcome, which is 41, but the remainder was 0. So because the remainder is 0, so now I can say that 205 is divisible by 5. The same thing, you can do the same thing if you have any other number which is like ending with 0. For the second example, or the second note, or the second basic, a number is divisible by 3 if the sum of its digit is divisible by 3. For example, if you have 201 as an example, or 201. Now, add the digit, the sum of the digit is 2 plus 0 plus 1. So 2 plus 0, which is equal to 2 plus 1. Now 2 plus 1 equal to the 3. Now, here is the point. If the sum is divisible by 3, take the sum here is a 3, divided by 3, we know that 3 divided by 3 equal 1, and the remainder is 0. So yes, the sum of the digits divides or divisible by 3. So in this case, yes, we can divide 201. So if you take 201 and you divide it by 3, take the 2, divide by 3. There is no 3 in 2, so we take the 0. 20 divided by 3. We have 6, 3 in 20. So we multiply 6 by 3 with 3, which is 18. Now 20 minus 18 equal to 2. Take the 1 down. Now 21 divided by 3, which is 7. 7 multiplied by 3, which is 21. If you take 21 from 21, you end up with 0. So again, the remainder is 0. So in this case, we can say that 201 can be divisible by 3. The last example, or the last note, which is a number is divisible by 2 if its last digit is even. The even number could be 0, 2, 4, 6, or 8. For example, if we have this number, for example, 68, the 68, in this case, the last digit is 8, and 8 is even number, so yes, we can divide 68 by 2. Now 6 divided by 2, yes, we have 3, 2 in 6, 3 multiplied by 2 is 6. You can subtract 6, subtract 6, 0. You can take the 8 down. 8 divided by 2. And in this case, we have 4 2 in the 8. So 4 times 2, which is 8. Now, when you subtract, you end up with 0. So the remainder is 0. So yes, 68 is divisible by 2. Remember all these examples. Based on that, we can go now to the main topic for this lesson. Let's talk about, for example, the square root of 300. If we are talking about the square root of 300, now let's factor the 300. To factor the 300, we need to start with 300 as follows. Now, ask yourself, is 300 divisible by 5? And the question is, 300 is end up with 0. So, is it divisible by 5? The answer is yes. So, I can start by dividing by 5. Now, start with the 5. Now, 300 divided by 5, you can use the calculator, and you will end up with, or the long division, with 60. Now, about the 60, you can ask yourself, yes, the 60 end up with 0, so I can divide by 5. So if you take the 60 and you divide it by 5, so you end up with 12. At the same time, you can say that I have a 12. Now, is the 12 divisible by 5? The answer is no. Why? You are right. Because 2 is the last digit, and the last digit isn't 0 and isn't 5. So, no, it is not divisible by 5. What's about the 3? Let's talk about 12. The sum of the number is equal 1 plus 2 equal 3. Is the sum is a 3. Is the sum divided by 3? The answer is yes, because the answer is 1 and the remainder is equal to 0. So yes, 12, it can be divisible by 3. Now 12 divided by 3, which is equal to 4. Now ask yourself about the 4. Is the 4 divisible by 5? No, that's correct, because 4 isn't 0 or 5, or the end of the 4 isn't 0 or 5. So what's about the 4? Is the 4 divisible by 3? If you take about the 4, the sum is just 4, because I just have the 4. Now take the sum and divide it by 3, you will end up with 1/3. So you cannot get now a whole number and without remainder. So you get some remainder for this question. For example, if you divided a long division like this, so 4 divided by 3 is 1. Now 1 multiplied by 3 is a 3. Now 4 minus a 3, which is 1. Now the remainder in this case is not is not 0. So in this case we have a remainder. The remainder is 1. So in this case, no, 4 is not divisible by 3. The last thing we can see, the 4 is even number, so it can be divisible by 2. So we can divide this by 2, end up with 2. Now, when we finish factoring, we can go back to the first expression. Let me just take out all these things here. We don't need it now. We don't need it. So now take the 300, start with the 5, and this will equal square root of now 5. Take the second 5, multiply it by 5. Take the 3, multiply it by 3. Take the 2, and here multiply it by 2, and take the last 2 and multiply it by 2. If you do some kind of calculation, like 5 times 5, which is 25. If you multiply it by 3, you will get 75. Multiply it by 2, 150. Multiply it by 2, you end up with 300. Remember now, that when we start here, we start with 5. But can we start with other number? Can we start with a 3? Look at this. Yes, 0 plus 0 plus 3 equal 3, and the sum is a 3. It is divided by 3. So yes, I can start with 3. Can I start with, for example, 2? Yes. The last digit is 0, and 0 is even number, so I can start with 2. Let me now go through this with you guys one by one. So what if, so there is a lot of options. We cannot go through all the options. I will give you just this option now. So if you have 300, let me start, for example, by dividing with 2, for example. So 300 divided by 2 is equal 150. For 150, I can divide by 5 because it's end up with a 0. And 1 plus 5 is equal 6. 6 divisible by 3. So yes, I can divide by 3. And at the same time, this is even number. Start with 0. So I can divide by 2. So I can choose whatever I need. For example, I can divide by 5. And I will end up with 30. For the 30, for example, I can divide by 2 and 5 and 3. Check the notes here, and you can see that you can use it all. So for example, I can divide by 3, end up with like 10. For the 10, I can divide by 2 because this is even number. I can divide by 5 because it starts with a 0, but I cannot divide by 3 because if you add the sum, which is 1 plus 0 as a digit, you end up with 1. If you take the sum and you divide it by 3, you will end up with 1/3, and this is not a whole number, and we still have like remainder. For example, 1 divided by 3, now take it as 0. 10 divided by 3, which is equal to 3. 3 times 3, which is what? 9. If you take it down, you keep going with this, so you will end up with the 0.03 or 0.3. So I don't have a whole number, and I still have all the time remainder, and the remainder will keep going and keep going. So I still have a remainder. So I cannot divide 10 by 3, but I can divide this by 5 and end up with 2, for example. Now, each time you decide to use one of these, 5 or 3 or 2, this will decide the path you will going. You will use it reaching to the factoring. So for example, in this case, we will end up like this. So we have 2 times 5, then times 3 times 5 times 2. 2 times 5, which is 10, times the 3, which is 30, times 5, 150, times 2, which is 300. You can use different paths, different ways to reach to the same factoring, guys. But now, reaching to this limit, if you factor and reach to the real factoring, the good factoring, so in this case, you need to know that when we are talking about the square root, the mathematician didn't write the number 2. All the time, if there is square root, there is a number 2. We don't need to write it. But remember that we are talking about here square root. And to make it easy for you guys, the square root means anything under the radical, you need now to take the two numbers that are similar. For example, group it in 2. So if you have 5 and 5, just cancel it and take 5 out. Now go to the 3, leave it. Why? Because you just have 1 3. For the 2, because you have 2 number, so cancel it and multiply it by 2 outside. Now the 3, keep it and keep it under the root like this. So 5 times 2, which is 10 square root of 3. Let me try now the second one. So, now look at the 2. So we have the 2. So cancel it and take it outside. Take the 5 and the 5. Cancel it and take the 5 outside like this. The 3 now, we don't have 2 3s. We have just 1 3. So keep it like this. Square root of 3. Now 2 times 5 is equal to 10. Square root of 3. You can see that any way you are reaching to the factoring, you will reach to the same answer. In this case, what we did is we simplified the square root of 300, but we used the simple math to factoring this 300. Hope you get this idea, guys. Keep pushing and we will learn together to make the math more and more easy.